Good afternoon, good evening, good morning to everyone. This is the Nordic Football Podcast. My name is Jonathan Fadugba, and I'm joined as ever by my good friend and colleague Steve Wyss. We are also joined by a very special guest. He makes an appearance every now and then. Let's say, I think it might be appearance number 4 for
Yes.
Vålerenga and current Flint Tønsberg manager, all the way from Norway, Mr. Shaun Constable. I'll introduce you first. Shaun, how are you doing?
I'm doing great, guys. I hope you both had a good Christmas.
I did.
Yeah.
And Steve, how are you?
Jonathan and Shaun, it's great to see you. And just had Tom Dent on the show, and Shaun realised that he needed to get back his appearance number for the record. So it's great to have him on board.
Yeah,
good stuff. So the plan for this podcast is going to ask Shaun a few questions. He's been out in Norway now for quite a long time, haven't you, Shaun?
Yeah.
So
certainly have. Yeah.
Tell us, since we last had you on the show, which was about 2 years ago, I think now.
Yeah.
Your journey and what you've been up to. I know you've been quite busy in Norway.
Yeah. I was in Bromma and I think the last time you spoke to me, and then I came back to Norway, and I was in a team called Moss FK. So I was there for about 9 months, and then there was a slight difference of opinion, and I moved on. And then I had a little bit of time to think, and then I got offered a job. It's my old sports director actually at Sandefjord Football, called Ronny Homerdal. And he's the sports director at Flint. And at the time they were in the 4th division, it's like 5th level in Norway, so pretty low. But Flint, I think we're the 9th biggest club in Norway. We've got 1,350, nearly 1,400 kids in our academy. So we've got a really big youth department. And the idea was just to go there and maybe, do something different, build a club from, and they're very well run. They just needed some professionalism, I think, in terms of like being someone ahead of the club. Ronnie is the sports director, and I'm actually a full-time employee with one of the Daga leaders. So yeah, it's a great little club actually.
So it's sort of local to you, you would say.
Yeah,
and,
35 minutes away. Yeah.
How have you found it then? Because obviously since leaving Moss, it seems like the kids are kind of a big part of the club, like you just mentioned there. How's it when you've been at the club? What were the big priorities when you joined, and how did your season go?
We did amazing. We got promoted this year. We won our league, which was not easy because unfortunately somebody in our club made a mistake with the yellow cards, so we got deducted 3 points. So you can imagine I was a very happy person at that time. No, we did really well. We won the league. We scored over 100 goals. We only conceded 16 goals in all competitions, so we did really well there. And then we played a team that has a budget of, in English, probably about 300,000, and our budget is about 50 grand. And we beat them over 2 legs, which was not expected at all. So the boys did amazing, and in that game I started with a 16-year-old right back, a 18-year-old centre half, and then a 19-year-old striker. So the boys did pretty amazing. So actually, yeah, like you say, bringing the youth players up is really important inside of the club. Last year we sold a player to Sandefjord Football for the first time. They've never sold a player before in their history, so it wasn't a lot of money, but we were trying to follow that model a little bit like Bromma.
Yeah, it sounds like you've taken the learnings from there, because obviously that's Bromma. For anyone who is a long-time listener of the show, when we had you on the show last time, we had a really good chat about their academy and the learnings, and that's one of the best academies in Scandinavia, maybe.
Yeah, outstanding. Yeah,
even in Europe. So
yeah,
was that like a decision for the club to focus on youth, or was it kind of you came in and you were like, I want to implement what I've learned from Bromma and other places?
Yeah, they definitely brought me in because they know that I'm a development coach, as well as developing myself as a head coach. If you go back to Moss, people can say what they like about what happened in Moss, but I had the second youngest team in the league that year. So I'm one of those players now. He's gone and played for KFM as a mid-stopper. He was 19 when he came to me in Moss. He's gone on in now, where they've gone and come second in Obos, and now he's going to play Eliteserien football next season. So they know I come from that background. So it was like, I suppose it's like, the hand fitting the glove, they bring a coach in with, youth development background and developing young players, and trying to move up through the gears basically. And this club is definitely a club that can go to Post Nord and possibly go to Obos in the next 5 to 6 years. I really believe that, and that's the reason why I'm there.
That's what I was actually going to ask you, Shaun. Like, in terms of the, I suppose, medium-term development plan for the club, you think Obos is within reach at some stage with the? I mean, it sounds like with the size of the setup you've got, you look like you're in a good location. You're quite close to the Torp Airport, aren't you? So that helps with a lot of things, I'm sure. But it's good that, I mean, you serious ambitions down there, long term sort of project, but you can get there.
Yeah, definitely. And the thing about Tønsberg is you've got another club that's in the city called Ike Tønsberg. They've amalgamated with another team, but Ike have the history, and they got promoted as well from the 3rd division into Post Nord. Tønsberg is a football city. It's very much like Fredrikstad, whereas like compared to Sandefjord's like used to be very much handball, and it's becoming a little bit more football, and it's still split a little bit. Tønsberg is 100% football city. There's lots of good players come from that region. If you look at Sandefjord football, they have something like 13, 14 of our players in their youth setup. So they come along and take some of our best players. And my job is to keep the 2nd, 3rd, 4th best players instead of losing all of them, if you understand me. And that's absolutely the plan is. When I first went in, they asked me, where do you want to take the club? I said, Obos, and they laughed. And I said, what are you laughing at? I don't think that's funny. So they were a bit like, oi. So that's the plan. We know that in time, we just got to be patient and make sure that the club and the team move at the same speed, So the funny thing was...
How many more promotions would you need to get to Obos now?
2. It's just 2.
It's 2 more. That's not... That can happen very quickly.
Yeah, mate, absolutely. Absolutely. And I have a team now. It's unusual. I have a team of young players where all these players at the same time are like going in the same direction. They're all on the same movement. They're all on the same path. What I've done is I've worked to push the club to put 5 of them on professional contracts, because I'm telling you now, 2 of them won't be with us next season. They're going to be sold to Obos or Eliteserien, no problem. The 17, or he's just turned 18. The 18-year-old mid-stopper, what a player that boy's going to be. I'm telling you, he's quality. And he wants to learn. He's hungry. Yeah, so there's a lot of talent there, and there's a lot of scope for us to develop those players. And I've got a 14-year-old that trained with our first team just in December, and he is something special, I can tell you.
Well done. Well done on your promotion this year, mate.
No, I appreciate that, man. Appreciate it. No one, I promise you, mate, nobody gave us a chance against a team called Rode, because unfortunately, you don't get automatic promotion in Vestfold and Østfold. So the 2 teams that win the league have to go into a playoff. And they're paying players nearly as much money as I earn as a full-time coach. So everybody betted against us, and we were magnificent, especially in the home game, which we won 4-3 in extra time.
Yeah. Shaun, you have had a bit of a history of playoffs in terms of Bromma as well, wasn't?
Yeah.
That was one that didn't go your way.
No.
So it's really good to see you sort of succeed and get over the line. Congratulations.
And can I say one thing about that? When I did it with BP, I didn't practice the penalties properly. This time, the 2 days before, we practiced the whole team doing it on Thursday, and on the Friday in the stadium, I got the PA system banging out loads of crowd noise and whistling and stuff like that, and I made all the players take penalties, and everybody had to take the penalty the same on Thursday and Friday. Nobody was allowed to change their minds about where they went, just in case we went to penalties. I thought, I'm not making that mistake again, but we didn't go to penalties anyway.
You sound like Mikel Arteta from the Arsenal documentary when he put the sound up for going to Anfield.
Mate, that's where I got it from. I'm sorry, but even though I'm not an Arsenal fan, but I took it. I thought, that's a good idea. Go on, let's do that then. Let's make these players, and I told them, decide where you're going to go on Thursday, and that's what you're going to do on Friday, and that's what you're going to do if you get up in the penalty. So we were really prepared, Sorry, digressing.
So on aggregate, what was the final score then? You didn't need penalties in the end, but what was
5-4? We drew 1-1 away, and to be honest with you, we should have been 5-0 down after 25 minutes. my goalkeeper. Yeah, well, at the end of the day, my goalkeeper made 2 amazing saves. We made my mid-stopper made a ridiculous block on the line. No one understands in the whole ground how that didn't go in. But in the second half, we came out and we played brilliant, and we scored a fantastic goal and should have scored a second. But we won't quib about that. But we did amazing in the second game. Tactically, we made it very difficult for them. So
yeah, and I mean, if we look at sort of our history together, like we've become good friends since first met, obviously, and had you on the show. You know, many times you've been in Norway. You know, you've been at Sandefjord, for example. You've had quite a storied career so far.
Yeah, absolutely.
What would you say the learnings before we come on to maybe your time at Moss a little bit and the season just gone? What would you say the learnings that you've taken into this job from all the other jobs that you've had in the past? Is there anything that you've changed in your style?
No. I'll tell you what I've done is from being in Brommapoikene to now, and my methodology is 100% written down and very, very clear in my mind about exactly how I want to play. And my training sessions reflect that. And we have clear like words that we use inside of training that relates to how we want to play. So if I use the word, which is funny because I got it from a guy called Gero the Hero from Östersund, as a big Nigerian striker, and he used to shout all the time, next action, and everybody used to laugh at him. And I thought, you know what, I love that. We use that because Norwegians have a tendency to, when they make a mistake, they always like, FIFA, and they do this thing. I think I've said that before. And we use the word next action. With players say it and I say it a lot, and it's just we use simple terminology. And I know that it makes it easier for the players to understand exactly what we're going to do. But every training session, every rondo, every passing session, everything that we do is related to how we play. So the players are very 100% clear on what we do. So it doesn't matter if we play 3-5-2 or 4-3-3. The way we play is exactly the same. So it's not about formation. It's more about the system, and not system and how we play, but the methodology behind it, the philosophy, if you want. And the other thing is to trust my gut instincts more. So that's the big mistake I made in Moss. Definitely.
Can you expand on that in terms of your gut instinct?
I was taught, my brief in Moss was to play 4-3-3 because they're a traditional 4-3-3 club. And on reflection, when I look back on that, I should have played a 4-2-1-3 or 4-2-3-1, depending on how you want to put it. Basically, my number 6 that I had 2 number 6s, and neither of them were mobile enough to play the way I wanted to play. I play with my fullbacks very, very high, so left us exposed. We conceded too many goals. And my instinct was, I should change now to 4. Just have a double pivot to give us a little bit more protection on the transitions. And I didn't lose it. I didn't do it, sorry, and consequently I lost my job.
Why is that, Shaun? In Norway, there's a lot of clubs, and they've always played the same system. And whatever manager comes in, the fans, the board expect them to do it. Rosenborg's a big example of it.
Yeah.
If you had switched to say a 5-3-2, I know you weren't going to be 5-3-2, but would it have been like outcry, that sort of thing, or?
I think it's like everything, mate. If you win, no one really cares, do they? But if you lose, then they go, you should have done that. And when you do that, you lose, and you still get stick for it. You know what I mean? So, when I left, the sports director, which is Thomas Mueller, who obviously played in goal for Norway, and he's a big character, and he took over as manager, and he changed immediately to 3-5-2. So it goes to show you. And he was the sports director, so everything is relevant, and he's been really successful. They ended up getting promoted the next season. They're playing in Obos now, so they did a great job. They've done really, really well. They play very direct football. They don't play the same way as I want to play. But I agree with you. It's like the same with Rosenborg as well. I think the trouble is that people shouldn't get so bogged down with systems, and they should concentrate more on how you want to play. What is the way you want to play? Today we watched a game with Brighton and Tottenham. 2 teams wanting to play out from the back. You've got one coach in De Zerbi that's had his players a little bit longer than I can't say his name actually. Ange, I'm going to call him Ange. And you see that actually, Brighton are a little bit better at it, and that's probably because of time of working with how they want to play. So I think Rosenborg's a fantastic example because they're so stuck in their ways that they're going nowhere fast, are they? So.
Shaun, would you say that your learnings from Moss and Bromma Poikina. You talked there in terms of these conscious decisions that you made to start writing things down, to start, for example, like you said, going with your instinct a bit more. Because obviously at Bromma Poikina, for those who don't know, you were obviously with the current coach, Andreas Engelmark, who's been there this season with the club. They obviously got in the relegation playoff and they had a sort of up and down season. He's now with Olaf Melbourne. But you two were kind of there together at Bromma Poikina. And you also had sort of some disappointments at Moss. I think, you left the club and you mentioned there that you might not, you didn't agree maybe with the decision in terms of things panned out for you. Would you say that, you've learned about that side of football as well in terms of who to trust or what, how you deal with a club and in terms of in good times and bad?
100%. I think the thing that I've done really well, and I say that myself, not trying to be too big-headed. I've always been quite self-reflective, and I've made many mistakes, like we all have in our football lives. But I write them down, I reflect on them. Can I improve on that? Can I make a better decision? Absolutely. I think sometimes the agendas inside of clubs you can't do anything about, but every experience is an experience, and you've got to take the positives and the negatives from both. I definitely hold my hands up and say, in Moss, I was a little bit naive, I think. And also, I think I was a little bit, I was spoilt I go from Ostersund's to Bromma Poikina, and Bromma Poikina was these young, amazing players. And then I go to Moss, and that was a big drop-off. The BP team I had, if it played against my Moss team, would have absolutely smashed them. Do you know what I mean? Because the Moss players, they were nowhere near the same level. So that's always the difficult thing to adjust when you drop down a little bit. So, of course, you learn these things, but I wouldn't do anything different. I still believe in my principles. I'm not going to ever go back on my principles. When we played, just for instance, when we played against Roda in the second game, they pressed really high with 6 players full on. So in that game, it's the most long passes we've done in 2 years. Because I'm not naive, and I think I learned enough to know, okay, listen, in this situation, we can go a little bit long. And we did that. And in the 25th minute, we scored a goal from our goal kick because we made them go back a little bit because we went a little bit longer in the first part of the game. And that was our game plan, to go over their press. And after a while, they were like, shit, we can't press anymore. So they dropped off. And then it gave us a little space. And then we played, I think it was 9 passes and we scored a goal. We scored the first goal. So it's not about going against your principles, but it's being adaptable, isn't it, to be able to see that sometimes you have to change a little bit. I've seen Man City go a little bit direct sometimes, hey? So it's just all about how you want to do it tactically for me. So I learned a lot from that side of it, I think, about not being too stubborn. I think that's a good word to put.
Would you say that?
Bluntly,
go on, sorry.
This is a direct one. The Moss situation. Do you think you were harshly fired or whatever you want to call it there? Because you had some good results. I remember the cup win was a brilliant one. You weren't exactly in that bad a way. So
no.
Was it just general differences, do you think? Or is it a club that's still almost at that stage, almost too under pressure and expectating?
Yeah, definitely, without a shadow of a doubt. And there's a few things unfortunately I can't really tell you. So it's a difficult conversation to have. But at the end of the day, they will turn around and say that they made a great decision because the next season they got promoted, and this season they survived in Obos. So for them, they've done amazing. So there's nothing else to say about that in that respect. I think for me, of course, I felt hardly done by. We were still one of the best possession-based teams in the league. We played some of the best football. There's no doubt about that. We staged our principles. And I think the most important thing is when you lose your job, it's the most important people is the players. And I can tell you now that the players didn't want me to leave. The same in BP as well in many ways. So for me, that's the most important thing, because at the end of the day, people will make decisions above you, and sometimes you cannot do anything about that. It's out of your hands.
Yeah.
So again, I speak to my players about controllables and uncontrollables, and also as a coach, you also have to understand that's the same for you. And you can do the best you can, but I think you've got to look yourself in the mirror and say, did I stick to my principles? Yes, I did. Okay, did I lose my job? Okay, I did. Was I a little bit naive? Maybe a little bit. Could I adjust? Yes, I can. And then that's how you move on, as far as I'm concerned.
I'll tell you what. If I mean, we know there's a big rivalry for Moss with the likes of Fredrikstad and Sarpsborg.
Oh yeah,
I'll tell you what. I think you can add Shaun Constable to that rivalry if you ever play them again. It'd be an interesting match, Shaun.
Yeah, it would.
Could happen in the next year or two. So you never know.
100%, my friend. 100%, definitely.
Yeah. Shaun, before we sort of wrap up and move on to the Eliteserien season. You underplay yourself a little bit because you're someone who's managed top players. I mean, Dejan Kulusevski, you mentioned Spurs just then. You coached him at Bromma Poikina.
No, I didn't. I didn't coach him. Actually, Andreas did. He left before I got there.
Okay, but you knew him quite well, isn't
it? He came in a couple of times. Yeah. He was training with Andreas, and I had a few chats with him. Yeah. Quality player.
What would you say, in terms of your ambitions from here? Are you kind of there for the long term at your current club? And just tell us a little bit before we wrap up the structure of the club. I'm guessing, is it part-time set up at the moment? And what are the ambitions next few years in terms of the coaching setup? How often do you coach? How often do you train? That kind of thing. And where you see yourself going, say, in 2, 3, 4, 5 years' time?
Yeah, I think you can say that our club now is like a probably like National League South North semi-professional. I'm full-time. I'm 100% contract, so I work all the time. I also have a role in the club as a spielerutvikler, so a player developer, also coach developer. So I take meetings with the coaches from the 14s up. I have a big meeting hopefully in January where I'll go through how I play and how I train, and for those guys to then take. If you look now 2 years in the club, if you go into our training sessions with our 14s and 15s and 16s and 19s, you'll see the sessions that we do in the first team. You'll see the passing sessions. You'll see the same rondos. The whole ethos is to keep the same way that we play. I don't expect the teams to play the same system, but I expect the teams to play the same way that we do. Flint has a history of producing players that want to play. So that's also very important. It works well for the ethos that I have as well. At the moment, I'm happy where I am. It's great, but in football, you never know if offers come. I'm really looking forward to this season. We're in the most difficult league. There's 4 leagues, 4 third divisions in Norway, and we're in the most difficult. But it's the shortest distance for travelling, so we've been quite lucky in that respect. But it's going to be really interesting for us, and I really believe, like I said, 2 or 3 of my young players are going to not be. They're not going to be at the club in 2025 because they're going to really flourish. They're really on their way up at the moment, and they've done amazing. And then they're hungry and they want to learn. But in football, mate, you can never say never, can you? If someone comes along and there's an offer, then I'll consider. But at the moment, I'm really happy to be where I am.
I'll tell you what, Shaun, if we move on to sort of Norwegian football as a wider talking point now, I actually said it on the last podcast we did. I believe the general state of the Norwegian league now is really strong. I think it's a stronger league than say Allsvenskan. I think it's getting closer towards the Danish Superliga. Teams in Europe have done really well. Yeah. And do you sense that yourself? Because I know you're focusing on your own division, your own club, but I know what it's like over there. You are looking. There's always a big interest in the top league as well. Do you sense that? Would you agree with me that Norwegian football is on the rise again domestically?
I think the top teams are. I still think there's a gulf between the middle to bottom part of the league. I still think there's a lot to be. They have to step up in that level at the moment. I go to Sandefjord a lot, obviously, because I was there for so many years. I can just pop in when I want. So I'm very fortunate. But definitely the top level, your top 6, I would say, maybe a little bit, maybe 8, 6 up. They've got really strong. Glimt obviously are the blueprint, not just for me, but for not just Norway, but Scandinavian football. Everybody should be going to Glimt to see what they do and how they do it. It's ridiculous. Look at Vålerenga and Rosenborg now. I mean, Knutsen, when he was asked by Rosenborg to go there, and he was like, "No, I'm going to stay in Glimt." Why would he want to go to Rosenborg? You know what I mean? Glimt are a far better club than they are. which is obviously that will put me in the bad books of most of Norwegians, because we know that Rosenborg's held very high esteem.
Times have changed, though, haven't they? Times have changed.
They have. And I think Rosenborg are run disgracefully. I really do. I think they should be ashamed of themselves, what they're doing. And some of the appointments they've done with their managers is a joke. I mean, you see now Marty Fuentes, he's in Sandefjord, did a great job, goes to Denmark, goes to he's now in QPR. Why the hell weren't they going for coaches like that? No. They decide to go for the dinosaurs instead. You know, that's really progressive football, isn't it, for Norway? So in some ways they're going backwards, in other ways they're going forwards. Like you see Molde, fantastic. You know, great finances, good recruitment, but a Glimt exactly the same. You know, Viking have done a great job as well, you know, recruiting successfully. And so some of those top teams that, you know, they want it. And don't forget Tromsø. I mean, a few years ago, the coach there was under pressure. And you see how what I like about him is that I didn't think that he could adapt, and he's adapted brilliantly. And the way that they play out, you watch them when they play out from the back now. Wow, the goalkeeper's like Edison. You know, so those top teams, they've been amazing. So, but some of the middle to bottom teams, they need to shake themselves up. And look at Vålerenga going down. I mean, you imagine being Geir Bakke.
Were you shocked by that? How shocked were you by that?
Absolutely shocked, mate. Absolutely. I mean, you go away from home and win 2-0. Job done. You know, go home, tighten yourself up, nick a goal, 3-0. Thanks for coming by. Absolutely got nervous in the second half. They fell to pieces and ended up losing penalties. We know what penalties are like. They're a nightmare. But before that, I mean, look at their squad. I mean, you know, and Geir Bakke, he's in a mid-table to above in Lillestrøm, doing a good job. I have no idea what happened there. Something happened, or I just don't know. I haven't heard any rumours about it. And he decides to leave and goes to Vålerenga and ends up getting relegated. Must be absolutely devastated. Because he's a great guy. I really like Geir Bakke, nice guy, but just couldn't get that team going. And
you just don't expect him to make that move, do you? Mid-season, he seems always quite a stable fella. It felt like a gamble. It really felt like a gamble to me. You know, who knows what the financial deal was there? But you'd hope that he was paid an awful lot more, because it's got to be damn well worth it for it to happen. That tifo that was revealed on the Derby game was one of the moments of the season.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a serious question here, right? If some of these clubs, which you know, we use the word dinosaur there, some of them are not run as well as they should. Could someone like Rosenborg or anyone else get sucked into that trap? Brand went down a few years ago. Could someone like Rosenborg genuinely go down if they're not careful one year?
Yeah. Of course they can. Absolutely. I mean, even their squad, you look at their players, I mean, Jesus Christ, I wouldn't mind having to go at some of them players and turn them into a unit. It's ridiculous. But I just think Vålerenga for me, and also Rosenborg, both clubs are almost a mess, I think, at the top of the club. There's so much politics going on. Left is pulling the right, the right's pulling the left. There doesn't seem like there's an ethos. There's no red thread anymore inside of those clubs. Where, you know, look at Rosenborg. Let's be honest. They got Kåre Ingebrigtsen and the big man. I forget his name. He's going to kill me for that. Shetter Rekdal. Don't get me started on him. I'm not going to even. You know, that was a disgrace. But anyway, I'm not going to go down that line. I'll get into too much trouble. So, no, Kåre Ingebrigtsen, his assistant, is a legend there. And they were doing an amazing job. And then the people above, like, for some reason, we don't want these anymore. And they won the double, sacked them both. Then I'm damned to pay a lot of money out in the court, because I think they got. I hope I get this right on for legal reasons. I think they got done. They managed to do Rosenborg for unlawful dismissal, and since then they have gone downhill. And the thing about Kåre Ingebrigtsen is that he played for the club. He understood the club. He understood the culture. He understood the ethos of the club, and they had a red thread going through. He was interested in the younger groups in the 19s. How was the academy doing, bringing the young players up? And then they get rid of him, and it falls to pieces. So, of course, it's not run correctly by these people that walk around. And honestly, mate, they walk around like they're gods, and they're not. You know, Norwegian football is ranked, 50-something in the world. So you have to have a reality check with themselves, you know what I mean, and know where they are. So
Shaun, quite powerful words there. I mean, you described Rosenborg as a joke, quote unquote, and you've had some snipers out for some people within the game there. Just want to ask you, just like to ask you, sort of, you bring kind of, obviously me and Steve, we look at it from the outside perspective.
Yeah,
you're actually inside Norwegian football.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing these words come as someone who's got the experience and you've seen these things behind the scenes. What would you say is the main thing holding things back behind the scenes? Is it kind of like, because to some, the decisions that are taken at clubs, and it's not necessarily just Norway, can be baffling.
No. Yeah.
Would you say that Norway kind of suffers from that to a certain extent at certain clubs? And how much would you go into that in terms of what do you see that kind of is holding back certain clubs? Because like Steve just said, there's teams that should maybe be doing better who are underperforming, but there's also teams doing amazingly well who are maybe slightly better run. So where would you say the line is between those two sides of Norwegian football? And what's holding
it's the same everywhere. You looked at England, look what's happened now. You've seen the sackings that are going on now in England, and the coaches that are getting jobs. It's quite scary. It really is. So it's not just Norway, mate. It's everywhere. And I just think that you need to have a clear methodology, a clear philosophy inside of your club if you're going to be successful. Go to Bodø/Glimt, look at them. Go to Molde, look at them. Okay, Molde maybe do it a little bit. They have a little bit more cash and stuff, but still, their recruitment is still pretty outstanding. Do you know what I mean? Look at Viking, how they've done it, how they've worked with not a massive budget, to be fair. It's a decent one, but it's not massive, the same as Tromsø. So, it shows you in Tromsø, they've kept the coach there for a long time. He's developed. They've got coaches in Viking that have been part of the club for many, many years. So they have an ethos, a philosophy, if you want, inside of their clubs, and they built it that way. And other clubs want to try and do it, but don't seem to get the correct people in. Now, obviously, there's no chance I'm going to get the head coach's job in Rosenborg, probably especially after today. So it's okay for me to be a little bit sanctimonious, sat in the third division in Norwegian football. And I'm sure some of the powers that be will, if they see this or listen to this podcast, they'll be like, "Who's that guy?" So that's fine. But I think it's in every country, mate. Some clubs are run better than others. That's just the way that football is. It's not an exact science. We all know that. We've all been in football long enough to understand it.
But from what you say, that sounds like it's kind of comes down to recruitment of players and recruitment of staff. Those are the two that separate the good from the
100%. It's always the way. It's always the way. You have to. I forget who said it. It might be my man Jurgen Klopp, of course. And I think he said, when you go into a club, even though it might be a short-term situation, you should always look at it as a long-term solution. And that means that when you go into it, don't think you're going to get. And I get it. Coaches go in there and think, I'm gone in 16 months, which is the average now, isn't it? 16, 18 months. Most coaches are sacked. Pretty much throughout Europe. I think that's the average in Europe. So, a lot of coaches go in of like, I'm not going to bother watching the under-19s because that really good 17-year-old, I'm never going to see him. Do you know what I mean? So it's about a philosophy. And I think going into a club and thinking, okay, I could be here a long time, even if I'm not going to be, and show that interest and find that red thread that goes through it. You said you interviewed Tom Dent, didn't you, before? Great guy, brilliant, done fantastically well himself. Got some done really well in Storza Blink as a head coach, and then he's now in HamKam. And look at them, what a job they've done. Absolutely fantastic. The striker that plays for them, I coached him in Sandefjord, Paul Schickerfold. I always say his last name wrong. But, and he's still, getting his age now, he's 30-odd, scoring goals. So they've recruited really well. Good coach, good philosophy in the club. So even though if you don't have a big budget, it's not about your budget. It's about being smart. It's about being clever and, trying to find the right players that fit the way that you want to play. Do you know what I mean? So that's the whole idea for me as far as I'm concerned.
Well, Shaun, it's always a pleasure to have you on the show. I mean, we promised that we'd let you go. I know you've got some New Year's celebrations to be had.
Yeah, got family. Yeah.
Shut down. I'm still waiting for my invite to be a chief scout, but it sounds like you're doing an amazing.
It'll come. I'm telling you, son. I'm telling you, it will come. It's just taking me a bit longer than I expected, but it will come there. Don't worry, son. It'll be there.
It sounds like you're doing an amazing job. Well, congratulations.
Appreciate it.
We'll obviously be keeping an eye on you.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
Of course, we wish you all the best for 2024 and the year ahead. Sounds like you got.
And you.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. My pleasure, boys. Always a pleasure for you two.
Very best of luck.
To be fair, you've got a pretty good map of my career over in Scandinavia, so I appreciate you guys.
We're like your life's journal, basically.
Yeah, you are, mate. You are.
If you ever going to write a book, Shaun, you know where to come. I can be sort of your
too right.
or whatever they call it like that. But take care, mate.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Yeah. See you later, boys. All the best. Bye-bye. Bye.
Okay.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Well, safe to say a fairly explosive interview there with Shaun Constable, formerly Bromma Poikina head coach, Moss F Core head coach. He's also been at Sandefjord. He's been around the block for a while, hasn't he, Steve? And I mean, he's not held back on some of the teams in Norway there. I mean, we haven't actually discussed what's gone on since the final day of the season in Norway, since we had the podcast. So context of that, let's just give a little bit of the context of the last season. I mean, firstly, Steve, what are some of your thoughts on what he said? And then we should maybe talk about the end of the season and just recap Norway.
I'm still kind of wow after that. I mean, we've had some great stuff with Shaun down the years, but I'm really pleased that he's told a few home truths. He's probably said a few things that I should have said at times how I've said before, I've kind of got a bit less controversial in the last year or two. I think that's a lesson to Steve Wyss. Well,
that's what I was thinking when he was saying it. I was thinking,
fair play to him. I think he's absolutely right. Rosenborg have deserved that rant on this podcast for a long time, and it's taken someone else to do it properly. But he's done a job well done. But I really feel like Shaun Constable is in a great place there. I think he said that he's learned from his previous jobs, and he might not have got through that playoff match if he hadn't have had the ups and downs at Bromma Poikina and Moss. And I really want to see him get up to Obos. I really want to see him get up to Obos, and let's get him playing against Moss now. But I think he was spot on with a lot of stuff. I really do.
Yeah, I mean, he'll need 2 promotions. They are now in the 4th tier, the team that he manages, Flint Tønsberg. So good luck to them. I mean, in terms of the rant about Rosenborg, they finished 9th, just to recap the season. Of course, Buda Glimt are the champions. Brann actually ended up finishing 2nd place, Steve. Tromsø finished 3rd as well, got a place on the podium. Viking just missing out on Molde 5th. So, you have had some harsh words for Rosenborg, but I think Shaun Constable has maybe outdone you with some of the things that he said there. We may have to even review some of them to make sure that we don't get sued. But let's recap the end of the season, Steve. What were the highlights for you from the last day? Of course, we spoke about the teams that were threatened with relegation, and there was a few. I mean, everyone who listens to the show will know by now, but there was a few big surprises at the end of the season, wasn't there?
Yes, Jonathan. I think the last day of the season, the big shock, we just talked about Rosenborg there. They actually won 5-1 away from home against Viking, which I didn't really see coming, even though there wasn't really much riding on the game in total. But in the relegation battle, Stabæk went down. They hung on to a 0-0 against Haugesund for a long time and then ended up losing 3-0. Sandefjord, as I said, they nicked that 1-0 win against Lillestrøm to survive. And Vålerenga drew against Tromsø 1-1 to confirm themselves in the playoff game against Kristiansand, and Tromsø at the same time achieved 3rd place. So Tromsø will be in Europe next season, which is fantastic for them. I think they deserved it probably. And then the playoff against Kristiansand, and I watched the first leg. 2-0 win for Vålerenga. They dominated the game. They should have had more goals. And I'll be brutally honest with you. I hadn't planned to watch the second leg. It was done. I'd stuck a fork in Kristiansand. I thought there's no way they can turn that around. And I was checking the score at half time. It was 0-0. I thought, the stats look pretty fine for Vålerenga. And I kid you not, the next thing I knew, I was checking my flash score app on my phone, and it was suddenly 2-0 to Kristiansand. And I was genuinely like, what the absolute F? And so that's when I started watching the game. And, of course, it went to a penalty shootout. And suddenly I was getting to a stage where I was like, shit, I'm going to have to prepare some tweets here because this is serious big news. And I had to take 2 tweets prepared. I had the tweet prepared for relegation, the tweet prepared for staying up for Vålerenga. And of course, they get beat on penalties by your boys, Christiansen. I mean, unbelievable turnaround. Shock of all shock relegations. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, I mean, my boys are back. I'm actually thinking of getting a Christiansen shirt, to be honest, because it's become a bit of a running theme, and I'm starting to take kindness to them. But I mean, Steve, we have to say, when the incident occurred, obviously with Vålerenga, we've been joking about it all season. We kind of talked a little bit about the possibilities, but when it actually happened, I mean, there was 2 things that happened on Twitter, wasn't there? Number one, the laughter. Well, number one, the tragedy for Vålerenga of actually getting relegated. And just the sheer shock, really. Like we sort of teetered around it, the possibility, but the actual fact of it happening is incredible. And of course, number 2, Steve, the memes, the jokes, the laughter, particularly from a certain set of fans. Just give us a bit of the context around that and the laughter that took place, because if you could have the word karma in the dictionary, I feel like this was the season where we saw the ultimate karma, and put it into context for us to see what it means.
Well, I don't think anyone really truly believed they would go down. I mean, they had a poor first half of the season. They sacked Dorgale for Gurmo, which maybe, I mean, looking back, maybe that was a really poor decision. And they brought in Guy Backer from their arch rivals, Lillestrøm, who is someone who's done well with Lillestrøm in recent years. It was a shock mid-season change. It's like Klopp going to Man United mid-season and then taking them down, like you said before. And, you know, it all culminated. I mean, when you think about it, since that tifo, the famous tifo, was revealed of him in the Derby game, they've hardly picked up a point. I think they beat HamKam after that. Was about their only win they had since that moment. Maybe that was a key turning point. There was the problem with making that move. There was so much pressure and scrutiny on him from so many different quarters. So Lillestrøm fans were loving it. They lost against, probably one time they were loving their team losing against Sandefjord. And to be fair, Lillestrøm actually played pretty hard in that game, I thought. So the players certainly weren't in on the plan. It was a legit win for Sandefjord. They totally went for it. But Lillestrøm fans were loving it. Of course, this happened to them a few years ago, and Vålerenga fans were rubbing it in with glee with them. It happened to Brann 2-3 years ago, and rival fans were getting into them. It feels like since we've started this podcast, there have been some seriously high-profile relegations into OBOS that shouldn't be happening, really. And the trend has continued. Of course, the past trend is that these clubs have come back strong and really well. Will that happen with Vålerenga again? I don't know. It should, but OBOS is stronger these days.
Yeah, I mean, you said it in your famous YouTube video about Klopp. It's like Klopp going to Manchester United. Well, the story has ended with Klopp taking Manchester United down in this sense. The massive rivalry between the two clubs, Steve. I mean, in my opinion, just as an external perspective, I think it's one of the most brilliant stories I think I've seen since we've done this podcast, in terms of just the sheer irony of it, the hubris, like just the fact that you take someone's manager, a big rival, and then you get relegated. I almost can't put it into context, really, in terms of like, I don't think there's ever been an English equivalent, if you think about it. Like, it could be like us and Wenger going to Spurs and getting them relegated. Like, is that like, if that happened in England, can you imagine if that happened in England? Like, it's almost unimaginable. I can't think.
Harry Redknapp is the only one I can think of.
But he's not as big. I mean, that's not a big. He wasn't at a massive.
He went from, where did he go? To Southampton. Did he actually take Southampton down? Or if he didn't, he got sacked before it happened. But that's the only one I can possibly think of where there's a comparison to a degree. It's and because just to add a further plot twist, the team that's got automatically promoted from OBOS is K from Oslo, or known as Koffa. You know, they're now the top team from Oslo in Eliteserien, because Stabæk are gone. So it's an unbelievable story, mate. It's like Leeds United getting relegated and Farsley Celtic coming back up to replace them. It's crazy.
It really is. I think it's an unbelievable story, and as I say, I think we covered it a little bit on Twitter, the memes and everything that was going around. But just tell this from the perspective of the Lillestrøm fans.
Yeah, I mean, this is very happy times for them, obviously, because they've suffered themselves. And you would be seriously annoyed that Gerd Bakker would leave then, for no seeming proper reason. To your biggest art, you just don't do it. Even if you've been sacked by them and then moved directly, you just still don't do it, do you? You just don't, because, I mean, I know but the thing was, he did have a history there at Vålerenga a little bit, but it's a crazy situation. It's the worst ever managerial move mid-season I've known anywhere in my whole life in any division. And, we talk about flop of the year. I'm going to give a player flop of the year later, but it was 100% Vålerenga are the team flop of the year, and Gerd Bakker has to be the overall flop of the year, doesn't he?
A bit of a spoiler for later on, but I think you can't really avoid it, the elephant in the room, can you? Let's look at the you're gonna name your team in the seasons shortly, and in part 2, of course, we're going to talk about Sweden and then wrap up the Swedish season. But let's just take a look at the tables. I mean, I'll just run through the table briefly. 16th place finish was bottom of the league, Arlesund. They finished with 18 points. As you mentioned there just now, Stabæk went down on 29 points. Vålerenga, of course, joined on 29 points in the relegation playoff and have since gone. Sandefjord, Haugesund, Ham in 13th, 12th, 11th, all in 10th place. Rosenborg 9th, Sarpsborg finished 8th, Strøm's Godset 7th, Lillestrøm 6th, Molde 5th, which was a bit of a surprise as well, especially considering your pre-season prediction. They didn't have the season many expected. Viking 4th, and then, as I mentioned earlier in the show, the Tromsø on the podium in 3rd, Brann 2nd, incredible season for Brann, and Blue Glimt the champions by 9 points. Steve, let's have a few words for the top 3, starting with Tromsø and leading up to Blue Glimt. I mean, how impressed were you? I know you were very skeptical about Tromsø in general, their numbers and their underlying stats, but just give us a bit of a overview of like their season and how they ended up in the top 3.
Well, of all the pre-season table tips, I talked about this with Tom Dent. I only got one exact position right, and that was odd. They're always reliable, aren't they? Mid-table somewhere. I had a really poor year for predictions. I think I was close with a few teams, but I was way off, really, in a lot of cases. Bodø Glimt were exceptional this year. I thought Molde would have the edge on them. Molde have been disappointing. Just couldn't get over their bad start. But, Brann, yeah, I got them wrong. I said, didn't I, pre-season? I thought they'd have a good year, but I didn't expect them to be this strong. They had that mid-season blip, and I thought I'm going to be proved correct. But they rebounded brilliantly. They won so many games in a row before losing the final game. And Tromsø, yeah, they kept up despite the metrics halfway through the season not being favourite. They're like seriously overachieving. They managed to stay in that position. And what they did do, they actually played better football probably in the second half of the season. And, sometimes actually the stats reverted to the mean. They lost a couple of games they should have won. So as Shaun Constable said there earlier, they are well coached. I've always said this. I think Gert Elstrup is a massive candidate for Coach of the Year. We'll talk about that later. He's definitely, massively on the short list, got the absolute most out of him. So I think for the 3 medalists, deserved positions, Viking will be disappointed because they were in a title race for a long time. But, I absolutely tip my hat to all of that. The top 3, whole top 4, really. I think they surprised everyone.
And a word for Brann?
Yeah, I really like the direction Brann are going in. They've obviously got something out of the season. They won one of the 2 Norwegian Cups which were on offer. They got themselves into Europe. So that's a successful season in 2nd place. And I was watching them in that great run towards the end of the season, and when they beat Bodø Glimt in, I think this is the penultimate game. And I was thinking, you know what? If they keep this up, they could win gold next year, like genuinely. And I've seen it before where, I don't know, a team over, say, a calendar year, more of a case in the big league. In the European league, it goes through the winter. And they just don't quite time it correctly. And I think Brann, if they can just time it so they can do it over a whole year rather than, say, in half a season, they're bang up there. They're moving completely in the right direction. And, there's a lot of Brann fans who listen to this podcast. And I hold my hands up. I got them wrong. I didn't believe they could finish as high as 2nd this year. There's no way I didn't see that happening. I think they've done a remarkable job.
Yeah, I remember you did say that you thought they were in the pre-season show. You thought they would start well, but you thought they might tail off. I guess it's a case of you were actually right. They did tail off, but it's just the fact that they recovered, didn't they? They found a way to sort of recover that initial tail off and maybe managed to get back on track. I mean, it's a shame, like you said there, for Viking. I believe it was final day of the season or final few weeks of the season where they actually lost that place. I mean, you've said Brann could potentially win the title next season. Of the teams that didn't get into the podium, before we talk about Glimt, who are you most sort of like pleased with, and who are you most disappointed with? I know you obviously Rosenborg down there. Sure, Sean's already said a few words about them, but who would you say? You got Viking fourth in the end, which isn't too bad, but Molde fifth. Who would you say you're most pleased with, and who would you say you're most disappointed with outside the relegation and top three?
I think the team that I'm pleased for. Two teams I'm pleased with, probably Strømsgodset and Sarpsborg. I mean, Strømsgodset finished 7th from nowhere. They were the team that every league has this, Jonathan. A team that sort of wins, 5 of its last 6 games when some others around them were on the beach. But they stayed completely focused. And, that's a fantastic finishing position for them. So I think there's a project undergoing there with Jürgen Isnes, which is well worth seeing, and I'll be interested to see how he develops that. So I was pleased for them. I mean, obviously, Molde are a disappointment in terms of 5th position, but they've won a Norwegian Cup. They're still in Europe. So I don't think it's been all bad for Molde, and they can definitely easily rebound. A team that I've been disappointed with, obviously Vålerenga, a big candidate for that, and Rosenborg. It's just not good enough. 9th place for a team of their stature. When there was a lot of pre-season talk that they could even challenge for the title. I had them 4th, so I didn't see them doing that. But for them to be so poor this year has been a huge disappointment. So I think they would have to be the overall. I mean, Vålerenga, yeah, but again, those two big giants, I think, are the disappointments.
Yeah, and I think there have been quite a few teams this season who've disappointed, haven't there, really? If you widen it out, I mean, I reckon you could probably name a few more if you were pushed to. Just on Tromsø, according to our partners, Y-Scout, and of course, we're so happy for our partnership this year with Y-Scout once again, successful partnership. They actually had the best expected goals against in the league, according to our partners, Y-Scout Tromsø, with Glimt in 2nd and Brann 3rd. So they've done really well defensively there in terms of Tromsø's record, 33 conceded as well, which was, I believe, the best defensive record in the league overall, but also the XG against. And also in terms of expected goals, Glimt miles ahead at the top, 75 goals expected, 78 scored, as we come to expect from them. And Molde were actually 2nd and Viking were actually 3rd. So those two teams can maybe feel like maybe it was the defensive areas that or maybe just lack of finishing, although both of them kind of matched their XG more or less. But Steve, let's talk about Glimt before we move on to your team of the season. Just a few words on the champions. And they've got their title back. Things are moving swimmingly. Of course, there've been a lot of links for the manager, maybe potentially leaving, but he stuck around, hasn't he, for quite a while. And they are champions again.
That was the main reason I didn't think they would win the title, because I was convinced that Kjetil Knutsen, that 2023 was going to be the year that he moved on. And the most realistic time to bring in Kjetil Knutsen to a club, a mainstream club, is to bring him in around June, isn't it? And it's just a question. I'm wondering if this is ever actually going to happen, because he's been so committed and so loyal to Bodø Glimt that, it was clear that they've got a great thing going. They're still in Europe, but I do wonder now, what else has he really got to achieve there? I mean, it's like personal challenges. Maybe he's one of those who wants to make them the all dominating force in Norwegian football. I know there's a lot of clubs that would certainly take him on board. He rumoured to be very close to some teams before, in even Premier League clubs. So, but he's got this team playing really well. The most important thing is they got out of the traps well, right? They had a fantastic start and they got themselves a buffer, which it was surprising that Viking managed to reel them in. But because they had got themselves such a great advantage, they could afford a little bit of a dodgy run. They had a little bit of a dodgy run. I'm just looking back now. 1 win in 5 games between 30th of July and 17th of September. And the difference there is you obviously visit European football qualifying affects you. And there was you get the odd week off, don't you, in the summer break. So I think that was the period that they were vulnerable. They lost at Viking, of course, but managed to pick themselves up again. And that was the most important thing. And they also managed to do that whilst they were still playing in Europe as well. And this happened a couple of years ago when they won the title. The more games they played, the better they were. And I don't know what sometimes teams do play better with rhythm. Sometimes teams, it's a nice excuse, isn't it? When look at Newcastle this year, Eddie Howe's coming out, we played too many games. Jurgen Klopp played too many games. That's only when the results aren't going well. It just shows you what you can do if you're in good form. No one cares how often you're playing. If you're winning games of football, Jonathan, you got momentum. And they were brilliant. They played a really good style of football, and they were a deserving champion this year. But they were pushed at times, which is good. They kind of responded again when Viking got on their back. So that was they'll be really, really pleased with their title.
Yeah, and let's be fair to them as well. They also had the probably pound-for-pound best player in the league, Amar Pellegrino, league top scorer, had an incredible year, didn't he? And just looking, I mean, you talked there about Glimt and what left is there for Kjetil Knutsen to achieve. Just looking at the all-time Eliteserien title honours, I mean, Glimt are now actually up to one of the top 10 now. 1, 2, 3. They're sort of joint 8th in the all-time title winners list with 3 league titles. Of course, their first ever league title came in, just a few years ago in 2020. So they've surpassed Strømsgodset, they've surpassed Lyn Oslo. They're level with Brann in terms of all-time titles, but they've still got another 23 titles to go, Steve, to equal Rosenborg at the top there with 26 league titles. Incredible, really. Just shows you how big a club they are, but nothing since 2018. Interestingly enough, Fredrikstad are the second most successful team in terms of league titles won in Norwegian football history, and they will be back next season. They have done well in the Obos, Steve. I know you've already said in the past you're looking forward to seeing them back in the top division. They won the league in Obos. You must be looking forward to their return. But just a word for a couple of players like Pellegrino and others that you've seen this season who have maybe caught your eye, and that you're, just to recap on that side of things as we go into your team of the season. Do you want to get into that now?
It's a good time, I think, for team of the season now, Jonathan. Yeah, we can get stuck into it. And I've gone with a 4-3-3 system this year. I've cheated a little bit. We'll talk about that later. I've cheated a little bit in one position, but with these teams of the season, you do have to adapt a little bit at times.
Well, it's not like you to cheat on one of these awards, is it? Having 2 players to watch, player to watch 2 years running. It wouldn't surprise me if you've got 12 players in your team of the season, knowing how you like to bend the rules, Steve. But so take it away. Let's get right into it.
Well, we'll start with goalkeeper, and it's actually been a great year for keepers. I think it's in a way a little bit lean pickings. It was a choice of 3 for me. I looked at Keto actually at Sandefjord. I think he had a pretty good campaign. Fair play to him. Hugo Keto impressed me. And then at Tromsø, I think Jakob Hårgaard had a especially good first half of the season. They overachieved defensively a lot, and he's one of the main reasons why. In the end, I've gone with Egil Selvik at Haugesund, and I've gone with him because I thought it was quite fun to get a Haugesund player in the team, and I actually think they'd have gone down without him, because if you look at some of the performances he had this season, he made some crucial saves. I think he genuinely earned them a lot of big points, and he's for me the clear standout in their team throughout the whole of the year. And I think he deserves his spot in the team. Like I said, there's probably the goalkeepers listening might hate me for saying this. It's probably the weakest position I've known ever had to pick in the team of the season, really. Normally there's a clear standout for me, but with the big clubs, it was there was a few injuries with their number 1 keepers, and there was a bit of rotation around, and no one mega stood out. So Egil Selvik at Haugesund for a keeper.
Yeah, and that's interesting, because there's been a few keepers that you've talked about quite a lot on the show this season. He's at Pesselton being one, who's recently moved to Elfsborg. I've seen in the transfer news breaking, but I mean, you do love a keeper, Steve, so that's
he had a good year. To be fair, Pettersson would have been in the mix as well, but they went down. I can't pick a keeper that went down. He kept, Selvik kept them up, so that's why he gets an edge there.
Yeah, I do. I think if there's one thing I would trust your opinion on, I trust your opinion on many things, but if there's one gold standard thing I would say that I can put your hat on with Meatman Soccer, it's judging a goalkeeper. You definitely got the eye for them. Let's move on to your defense.
I'm going with back four this year, and we've got
two from one club, by the way, which is really interesting.
Yeah, we'll start at left back. Joachim Soltvedt, I think, is the clear standout there. Sarpsborg and Brann moved mid-season, but he could have got in based on his performances at either team, really. The centre-back pair, I'm going with David Brekalo at Viking and Jostein Gundersen at Tromsø, and another Tromsø player at right back, Nicholas Vesterland. They were exceptional defensively. And I think Tromsø, I said the keeper nearly got in as well for Tromsø. So it just shows you how strong their defense was. I think, did they concede the fewest goals of any team? I'm pretty sure they did. 33 goals against overall, which, that's a magnificent achievement. And I think these two players are one of the main reasons why. I think Gundersen was linked. I've not really been following the transfers stories yet this winter, but I think Gundersen and Buda Glimt were interested in signing him. Vesterland has been a really, really good right wing back for the last couple of years. He really has been exceptional. He would have easily got in last year's team were it not for Martin Linnes. I think he offers so much going forward as well as defensively. So the two Tromsø players for me pick themselves as a standout. And Soltvedt, like I say, actually Brand's defensive record was really good. Fantastic mid-season signing. Maybe one of the reasons that Brand managed to rebound so well, because they brought in a player who made a big difference to them, both defensively and defensively. And then at David Brekalo, if you look at when he got injured, that's when Viking's bad run started. His points per game must be one of the highest averages in the league from any player this season, because he had that knack of just really leading them at the back. And it was a massive blow when he got that groin injury. He missed near enough the last, 7 or 8 games. Or he certainly wasn't fit for the last 7 or 8 games. And that's when their bad run coincided, mate. So it's a strong back four for me. I really like that back four in my team this year.
Yeah, it's also very balanced. You got although you've got two Tromsø players, I think that's totally fair enough given their excellent defensive record and some really stand-up players. Brekalo, I think, had a really good season, didn't he? Let's move into your midfield. Like you mentioned, you've gone for sort of a 4-3-3. So you've got 3 central midfielders here.
Yeah, I've gone with. You could probably call the first player here a defensive midfielder or a deeper midfielder, and that I'm actually going with another Viking player here, Marcus Solbakken. And the 2 players that I'm playing alongside him are Emil Breivik and Albert Grombach, who are more offensive-minded midfield. I think Solbakken's another player. He goes, and not too many will talk about him, but I think he was one of the main reasons that Viking went so well this year. They didn't just title challenge because Trippic had a brilliant year, and they got goals from the likes of Salveston. They had, for a lot of the year, they actually had a decent defence, Brekalo was a big reason for that. And I think Solbakken was a reason for that in midfield. I think there was a period, a month or two, where he was putting in some exceptional performances. He's not going to contribute with goals and assists, but he's just there, a little bit similar to the water carrier role, the Makaleli role. These players, you'd love this sort of player. This is your area of the field, Jonathan. I struggled to analyse them as well. But there's no doubt, I think it was really hard not to include him as a player of this type. Every team needs like a good D mid, don't they? And I think Solbakken, mate, is he's probably the one player in this 11 who some might think, who's he? Under the radar a little bit.
Yeah, under the radar. I quite like Nipan. He's a young talent that really caught my eye. But as you mentioned, Rosenborg didn't have a great season, did they? So totally fair enough there. You got one from Viking, one from Molde, and one from Glimt. So I think that's pretty fair enough.
The two other players. Grombach was brilliant with his numbers. Fantastic sort of player, gets in brilliant positions and contributes with goals, assists, great work rate. I think he's probably the next big player to get a huge move out of Glimt. They paid decent money for him anyway, so he could go for close to 10 million, I reckon, at some point. Whether it's this coming year, I'm not sure. And Breivik was a breakout year for him in Molde. 7 goals, 7 assists. There were times when Molde played really well, but they just didn't have enough players who over the whole season were consistent. Often because of injuries, but probably only Breivik and maybe Christopher Hagen were the only 2 players that really you felt were sort of nailed in, week out. And Breivik was one of the few players who stayed fit, but he looks a really great prospect, still a young lad, and I think one to watch going forward again.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of rumours about him as well, isn't there? I think there's a lot of talk about him maybe getting a potential move at some point. So definitely a talent there. Up front, Steve, I mean, I've mentioned one of them already. Can't really leave him out. You've got 2 from Glimt and 1 from Brann. So I think most avid listeners of this pod might be able to guess who they are, but take it away.
This is where I've cheated a bit. I mean, Pellegrino has to be in the team, but he has to be in at left wing because he cuts inside. I can't put him anywhere else. And there's 2 or 3 others who have been really good at left wing this year, and they are Trippic at Viking, and I really like Danilo El-Sad at Sandefjord, actually. But none of them, I look back, I was just hoping they played right wing some games, but they didn't. So I've had to cheat. Bordfinner has to get in the team. He's played striker all year, but he has played right wing quite a lot. So in my team, Bordfinner gets in at right wing, which means I can fit in Faris Mumbanya, who has led the line brilliantly for Budiglim this year. So those are the final 3 for me. Pellegrino goes without saying. What a player. Quite how Norway never called him up, I don't know. I did hear last I heard that he might was looking into making an African Cup of Nations appearance for Tanzania. Now, I don't think he made the final squad. I'm not sure whether he's ended up going down that route, but it's criminal that Norway never even gave him a look in the last 3 or 4 years. Unbelievable talent. He's technically one of the best players I've seen in the Eliteserien ever. He gets in. I mean, his numbers are unbelievable. The goals that he scored. So he's a lockdown. Bordfinner had an unbelievable season as well. He was brilliant in Obos, and I actually questioned, didn't I, whether he could do it at Eliteserien level to the same degree. Well, he absolutely nailed it. And it's great to see a player who in the past has underachieved, but he's come back really strongly. And Mumbanya was just the striker that they needed, Glimt. They lacked that physical presence last year. He got himself about a bit. Big lad. And I think 15 goals. It's not just that. He got a lot of assists as well. And he was just a massive handful.
Yeah, and Banya's the one that I think that maybe might not be on the radar of as many people, but I remember us having a good discussion about him sort of in the latter part of the season on this show. We kind of talked a bit more about him, and Pellegrino's kind of overshadowed a lot of players, hasn't he? Really, he's been so outstanding this season with his goal contributions, incredible amount of goals. But yeah, I think that's a really rounded team, Steve. I don't know if you just want to read it all again, just to read out the 11 one more time. Yeah,
so Egil Selvik in goal, back 4, Niklas Vestlund, Jostein Gundersen, David Brekalo, Joachim Soltvedt, midfield trio of Marcus Solbach and Emil Breivik, Albert Grombach. And then I'm going with an attacking trio of Almo Pellegrino, Bordfinner, and Faris Mumbanya. And like I say, I wanted to get a genuine right winger in, but there wasn't anyone good enough this year on the right wing in Eliteserien, so we have to balance it out a bit.
And final question on that before we move on to part 2. Well, actually, moments of the season, Steve. I know that Aker Adams isn't in this, but he did still have the 5th highest expected goals, despite the fact that he left the season in mid-season. We got Pellegrino top of that, Finner, who you've got as well, Mumbanya, Lennart Olsen as well is in there, although he has 1 fewer goal than Mumbanya, and then Aker Adams 15 goals. Maybe a word for him, like he's not in the team, obviously, understandably why probably, but maybe just a word for him because he's doing fairly well, isn't he? And there's already been Premier League links.
There were certainly quite a few honourable mentions. I mean, Thomas and Olsen had a pretty solid season as well. They had a fantastic strike duo, and Adams no doubt would have got in this team if he'd stayed the whole season. I mean, he was on course for 30 goals. So yeah, huge mention to him. I think coach of the year, manager of the year, I'm gonna go with Garta Helstrup. I think at Tromsø, I think he's got the absolute most out of it. I think he's the man for me there. There's a few other coaches that would probably want to get a mention as well. I think Garta Helstrup's the man. Moment of the year, I think if we in terms of a match, the one that really sticks out to me is Tromsø beating Viking with 2 goals in the last 2 minutes. So it's completely end Viking's title run really, and getting Tromsø in there. But in terms of actual moment, it's got to be that tifo, hasn't it? In the I can see that tifo in my dreams. What creature was that? I mean, we're not going to see the last of that tifo, mate. That's what I'll say. I think will it ever come out again? It was an unbelievable, memorable moment. And what was the other thing on the itinerary? Young player of the season. Can I go Grombeck? I know he's in my team. I think he's still pretty young. I just feel like he was so good. 22. Maybe he's a little bit old for that actually. But yeah, fleeting moments, perhaps. But yeah, I mean, it's always the question: how young do you go? I mean, in the Premier League, the young player of the year can be 24 under, can't he, or something? It's ridiculous. But I suppose in Norway it needs to be someone maybe 19 and below. I don't know.
Fair enough. Sounds like you're a bit on the fence there, but we'll let you off. Join us in part 2, where we will talk about Allsvenskan. I mean, all in all, Steve, just a final question, have you enjoyed this season of Norwegian football?
I have enjoyed it, mate. It's been a really good season. There's been a lot of goals, and when there's a lot of goals, I'm a happy man. There's been a lot of twists and turns, a lot of surprises, and I think that's good for the league. I've said before, the league, I think, is in a great place. The best teams really have been good. I like watching good football. I like watching good teams. There was a year, wasn't there, where I was really down and depressed and not enjoying life with Norwegian football because it was just a hard watch. And then those days seem long gone now. So, yeah, I don't know if are we talking fantasy later or...
We'll do fantasy later.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. Okay. Well, I was going to mention the Eliteserien fan. We'll do that in this part.
Go on. Let's crown them right now.
The league winner was Larry M for the Nordic Football Podcast League, and the name is Forsterman til Moya, and I have no idea what that means at all. I've not even imagine if that's something really offensive. I haven't got a clue, but that's his team name. Anyway, 2,020 points he finished on. He was 13th overall in the entire fantasy, and he was one of only 30 people who scored 2,000 points or more in the game this year. So well done to Larry M. I also want to give a big shout out to the top 3 in England this year, which was Andy Martin and Heskebo. And there were only 3 points separated those two. I think they had a really good... Andy Martin, at one point, he might have been on to win the whole thing. I thought he was going to win the whole lot, Jonathan. I really did. He had a great thing. And then Samuel O'Toole was the 3rd place finisher in England. There's some really great fantasy minds in the game, but the Norwegians are so sharp.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know what that translation means, but we've rattled enough cages there with Shaun Constable's explosive comments. So well done, Steve, for all your coverage this season as well. Excellent work editing the pod as you do year in, year out. Stalwart, mate, stalwart you are. So join us in part 2 after this short break. We will be talking about Sweden. Obviously, the Allsvenskan season finished a few weeks earlier than Norway, but we will wrap everything up and give out a few awards ourselves at the end of year Nordic Footpod 2023 show.
Welcome back to the Nordic Football Podcast. This is part 2 of our season or yearly review. You with Steve Wyss and Jonathan Fadugba is here as well. We're going to be talking Sweden Allsvenskan very soon. But this, just while we're here, I want to say thanks to all the listeners for 2023. This is our actual 24th episode of the season. And an interesting start here, Jonathan. It's our first episode which is released it should be released in January for 4 years. We haven't actually had an episode go in January for 4 years since 2019. So new territory for the Nordic Football Podcast. We have been a bit more sporadic with our episodes in 2023. So who knows in 2024? There might be some random ones at different times.
Well, I wouldn't say sporadic. I think there's a clear distinction in the season. Obviously, I've started a master's degree. It's been tough. So I have to hold my hands up on that one. But, life takes place sometimes. I want to give a massive thank you to all the listeners, of course. I also want to give a big shout out to our fans on Patreon, supporters. They've really helped us keep going throughout the year. And I really appreciate each and every one of you. We did invite a fan onto the show, if those of you on Twitter have seen. Big Sig was the candidate, but unfortunately he went out on a New Year's party. So we got the Constable in instead. But of course, we have a good relationship with our fans. And I think next season, we'd like to get more of you involved. So if you do fancy coming on the show at some point, if you are a Patreon as well, of course, that is your right as a patron. You are entitled to come on the show and say hello. So I know that a lot of people like to be more quiet and a bit more in the background. So it's up to you. But of course, give us a message if you do. And as always, like I say, Steve, I really, really appreciate the support of our patrons.
Yeah, maybe one time we will do that live show, which I've mentioned and threatened before, where you can all come in and grill us both with questions. And that may well happen in 2024. Who knows? But back to the football then, Jonathan, and Sweden Allsvenskan 2023. You've talked about this before because the season finished earlier. We've wrapped up the final rounds and things, but just as a general whole course of things, what's your feelings about Sweden Allsvenskan for 2023? Are you getting good vibes, bad vibes? Was it for you a season? Rate the season out of 10 for me.
I would rate it as a 7 out of 10. I think that we do have sort of ups and downs with this league. I think the one good thing about me and you, Steve, is that we're not propagandists. Like we're not like Match of the Day or the Premier League where Jamie Redknapp will come out after a 0-0 draw between Fulham and Bournemouth and say this is the best league in the world. You know what I mean? Or Jamie Carragher after a 5-goal thriller laced with VAR mistakes and errors coming out and saying what a fantastic league we have. Like I don't buy into that, and we have no reason to do PR for these leagues, unlike certain channels. But I think I would say that it started very well. I give it a 7 for 2 reasons, Steve, that disappointed me slightly. Number one was the end of the season, which I thought was a real anticlimax. The 45-minute break, I think it was, that basically stopped the match at half-time in what could have been one of the best games in Allsvenskan history, in my opinion. Malmö Elfsborg for the title, just the fan trouble and everything like that. The game stopped, and it was symptomatic of the whole season in general, really. The amount of stoppages we had in so many big games. You could almost, Steve, probably set your watch to go for a run at half-time or at a certain point in some of these matches, because you'd have a good 40 minutes free whilst the fan trouble was sorted out. So I think in a lot of the key big games, that was a real disappointment. And I think for it to happen in a game that was literally winner takes it all for the title, it was just a bit of an anticlimax. Even the way the game was won, a sort of soft decision, really, I think, penalty. I think it was just a bit of an anticlimax at the end of the season. And number two, it's just, it kind of is inevitable, I suppose, but just the fact that we lost so many top players mid-season, I think it's inevitable with this league, so I can't really complain about that. It happens, and it's nice to see them move on. And you know what? I actually quite enjoyed watching some of the players in other leagues, Steve. Some players, for example, move on to the Championship. Benny Traore, for example, at Sheffield United. It's been nice to keep tabs on some of these players in Germany and elsewhere. But from a league point of view, I go back to sort of when I was in Gothenburg, Steve, with a good friend of the pod, Sam Hart, and just watching some of the players at Häcken and Djurgården, and literally about a month later, half of them were no longer in the league. So it just tells you that it's one of those leagues where your top performers, you don't get long to watch them, which is probably a bit of a shame for the Swedish supporter, I would imagine. And I think this season there was a lot of top players that left mid-season because they did so well. So those were the two reasons I give it a 7. I think the title race was very exciting, Malmö and Elfsborg. Obviously, Malmö won the league, came out triumphant on that last day. Bit of a shame for Elfsborg the way it happened, I think, and that was where the anticlimax really I felt kind of took place. It could have been a blockbuster end. didn't quite turn out that way, but it was built up so nicely. And then the other thing is, of course, Steve, that some of the teams this season, we've heard Shaun Constable go off on the show earlier on certain big clubs in Norway. Same thing applied to certain clubs in Sweden. There was a few teams this season that really, I think, let themselves down a little bit, and some of the smaller teams actually were the teams that I looked to for the best football in terms of just general performance levels and attacking football. So taking all that into account, I'd say a solid sort of 7 out of 10. Could do better, but was still very enjoyable. And on a personal note, Steve, being able to get back out to Sweden, obviously for the first time since the pandemic, and get to Gothenburg and revisit the old stomping ground, that was a lovely moment for me.
Yeah, well said actually there. I think I'd actually give Eliteserien 10 out of 10, for the season. I can't believe I'm saying that. It had everything in the Eliteserien, but it's not always the case that way. And you're right. I feel like the first half of the season of Allsvenskan was exceptional. I couldn't get a true feel of the teams for the second half. And I think a lot of it is to do with the player transfers in and out. Constant matches getting suspended for crowd trouble and things like that. That's starting to annoy me. I'm pleased that you managed to get out there into Sweden again. I mean, I think probably I need to get myself out there to Scandinavia. Maybe not 20. Who knows? Maybe 2024. I don't know, Jonathan. I think if I can get the wife to let me go, she might let me go off to Scandinavia. What do you say? Sure, whatever. She says, sure, whatever. Yeah, I'm pleased that you managed to. I feel like this year you've stayed in love with the game of Sweden Allsvenskan again, which has always been the case for you. But you asked me a couple of teams that sort of pleasantly surprised you, and a couple of teams that didn't. So I suppose I've got to ask you the same. Name me at least one team in either direction who were tops and flops.
Yeah, good question. Where do you start, to be honest? Should we wait for my flops of the year, or should we just get into it straight away? I've got two standout flops. I'll start with tops, though. Let's be positive, Steve. Vålerenga finishing 5th, absolutely unbelievable achievement. Only their second ever season in an Allsvenskan. And they have probably the smallest budget, if not the bottom 3 budget. Should be competing for relegation. For them to win 14 games out of 30 with that budget is a testament to the coaching. And it's the reason why, obviously, Kim Helberg's got a job at Hammarby and was linked to Sunderland, of course. For those who have followed since the season ended, Kim Helberg, the Vålerenga manager, has left. David Salini, of course, who was on the show last year, he will be joining him at Hammarby, massive club, with the departure of, obviously, Cifuentes to QPR, who's doing pretty well there so far. So Vålerenga, for me, big tick. Kalmar had an okay season in 6th, but I thought they were a little bit. I think they sort of they dealt well internally with the replacing of Henrik Rydström, but I didn't think they were necessarily stand out. 35 goals in 30 games meant that they were a little bit. They weren't sort of like blockbuster, but they were just solid, and that's a good end of the season for them. Obviously, shout out to loyal supporters of the podcast who are Kalmar fans. I do want to go out to Kalmar as soon as I can at some point. I think I'd like to experience a Kalmar game in my lifetime. So, Elfsborg, of course, they were massive. They played a central part in this season. I think you could actually argue Elfsborg were the team of the season for me. I think they made it a title race when so many other teams flopped. Häcken, their adventures in Europe was very exciting, and I think although it ended quite badly, just in general they're always an exciting team. But they again got picked away in the summer. Sirius, although I did have.
You had right. I was just thinking back to your rants of the year. I think there was at least 2 or 3. Degerfors, Sirius, and there was someone else. I'm sure, probably EF Core. But you had some really good rants this year, mate. I could argue like a top 5 of them almost.
I think Varberg was. I don't think I ranted about AF Core, but
Varberg. That was it. Varberg. Yeah.
But Sirius, after my rant, anyone who might remember that, you can go back. But they actually. I found them one of the most entertaining teams in the league. That's some brilliant games. I mean, the 4-3 with Degerfors, that game was incredible. Was it 4-3 or 5-4? But yeah, they were involved in some top game series. I enjoyed watching them. Not necessarily in the first half of the season anyway, pre-rant. But when we move on to the flop, Steve, I'd have to say that obviously there's a few standouts. I think Varberg boys, it was a year too far for them really. Back down they go. I did say in pre-season that I thought they'd finish bottom. I think, and I think that is where they finished comfortably by 11 points, rock bottom. Not even Stone Cold Steve Austin took as many rock bottoms as they have this season. Some of the games they played in were an embarrassment.
I'm trying to think who would win a playoff out of Alsund and Varberg, because they had about 100 losses between them, didn't they, this season? But yeah, go on. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I think back to the Sirius 7-0 Varberg game where Varberg just gave up basically. I remember them having a team talk at after 26 minutes on the pitch, just like 4-0 down or whatever, just being like, what do we do here? But yeah, they were really poor. And I think, the manager obviously left mid-season, went to Denmark, that kind of thing. And then a lot of the big boys, Steve, I think disappointed this year, really. Hammarby, although they finished kind of in a respectable position in the end, in kind of like 7th, thought they were very disappointing overall. And that's why Marty Svensson's probably thought about leaving. I thought that AIK were really, really bad. Henningberg came in and I don't think much improved. Really, they just about scraped to get out of relegation by 3 points. EF Göteborg, of course. The game I saw, they beat Degerfors 6-0, but of course they nearly went down and they needed to beat VAR. They had to rely on beating Varberg in the last game of the season just to stay up. And I thought that a narrow win at Varberg in the 95th minute, they celebrated it as if they'd won the Champions League. So although I'm a massive, they've got a soft spot here for my heart. I thought the scenes were a little. I think Roy Keane would have been disgusted seeing those scenes. Imagine if Manchester United, EFK you could level as Manchester United of Sweden in a way. Imagine if United had celebrated that hard from avoiding relegation on the final day. I think Roy Keane.
I can just hear him now. It's like, what are you celebrating for? Do your job.
It's a job to finish outside. Yeah, he would be.
Job to finish.
So I thought that although they survived, and I can understand the emotion behind it, I thought that they had a really bad season ultimately, even though they recruited well and got out of it. But they really could have gone down. So those were the sort of highlights of the team-wise.
The title race was, although I know the last game of the season was a bit of a disappointment. It did go to the wire. It was decided by goal difference. And Malmö are back they seem to have a habit of this. They win a title and they don't win one, then they win it the next year. And they're back on track. The first sort of 10 games, I thought they were brilliant this year, but Elfsborg reeled them in. Worthy champion, Jonathan, or, did the best team lose out?
I never subscribe to the fact that I think the team that wins the league is the worthy champion. So I think Malmö are worthy champions, but I think they scraped home massively. Elfsborg had a really, really good season. I feel like it would have been a good story for them to win it because they were a really good team. But I think this season, Steve, I think Malmö got away with it a little bit in the sense of I think Häcken and Elfsborg lost key players to the transfer window, whereas Malmö were able to buy. And that's where being a big club with money can have a good impact on you. Malmö played well this season. Like you said, they started the season on fire. Everybody thought they'd win it comfortably. I obviously, in my season predictions, I had them to win the league, and I thought they would win the league, and they have won the league. But I didn't think it would be so close. They kind of had post-summer, they just really stumbled in a lot of games. They really suffered from a few departures, but fortunately for them, they were able to dip into the transfer market and get enough quality. The likes of Pontus Jansson, Otto Rosengren coming in, just to sort of see them over not necessarily to be amazing, but to see them over the line. Even Kiesa Tellin, Steve, if you look at it, he's finished the league, I think the top scorer in the league. But his tally, you'll tell me, but I think it was one of the lowest there's been in recent years. His actual goal tally in terms of top scorers for a top goal scorer in Allsvenskan. And I didn't think he had an amazing season, really. And he's ended up sort of, if you compare him to Pellegrino, who was just unbelievable, you can see the contrast just in the top goal scorers alone in terms of Kiesa Tellin wasn't amazing, but he's somehow ended up top scorer, mainly Steve, because I think the two scorers below him, or 2 or 3 scorers below him, all left. Traore, Radjovic, the likes of Jeppe Ockels, and not Jeppe Ockels, but other players, Ondrejka, as an example. So, yeah, I think that's where Malmö, I would say that they just about got over the line. Henrik Rydström, in his first season, you got to give them massive praise. Malmö, that they've had some really top performers. Don't forget, some of them in my team in the season, which we'll talk about. So, all in all, I think they're worthy champions. But I do feel that the biggest contributing factor, I think, to Malmö winning the league was the biggest contenders to them losing their key players at certain times. The likes of Gustav Lagerbielke going to Celtic, for example, Roma, who left. For Häcken, of course, Benny Traore and Sadiq as well, who was incredible at times in the season. So I think that was a big factor as well, Steve. Lars Olden Larsen, at Häcken as well, leaving. So the really key players for the title champions both left. And then it was a case of teams like Djurgården and Hammarby just weren't up to it this year.
Yeah, you did predict them as champions. I'm just looking back at your season tips now. I'll give you it this year. You beat me in terms of league positions. You had a good year. You predicted Malmö first. You got Kalmar in sixth place, which I think was an exact spot. You had Mjällby in ninth and Norrköping in 10th, which was, you switched them around and you were accurate there. You had Häcken in second, Djurgården third, which is pretty close. You had Varberg to go down. You had Brommapoik at bottom, and they finished in third bottom. You said Halmstad would survive, and they did. You've had a good year. You've had a pretty good. I mean, obviously Elfsborg surprised everyone, and IFK and AIK, no one could have foreseen that. But yeah, fair play, Jonathan. I think you got to, pat yourself on the back a little bit.
Not sure how many I got. I think last year I did better, to be fair.
In terms of exact positions, probably, yeah. But I think in the general trend of your table, you had a good feel of the teams pre-season.
Yeah. I think I also have to, in terms of teams that I missed out on there, you got to say, you got to give a massive shout out to Elfsborg. I think under Jimmy Tellin this season, they've been fantastic. I think they've probably been the best team in terms of the team that most surprised me in a lot of games. I think back to sort of Djurgården away, for example, some of the games like beating Malmö. They had certain games this season where I thought they were really like Elfsborg were the team that really stuck the course, didn't they? And it was just a shame they couldn't get over the line in the last game. And I felt it was a shame it came down to a penalty, really. They, in a way, almost, it's quite weird, isn't it, Steve? When you have a title decided like that, you almost think extra time, or a two-legged game would be good or something like that. What I mean? It almost felt like that kind of game, didn't it? Where you wanted like a second leg or something, but it's the league title. And at the end of the day, Malmö got over the line, and that's what champions do. That's why they are the champions.
Yeah, it's well done to them. They got over the line, and like you say, now we will move on to your team of the season. So yeah, let's get straight into it, Jonathan. What's your lineup, and who are you going with?
Yeah, I've ummed and ahed about this one. So let's start off. Firstly, I'm going for a bit of an old school formation, Steve. You commented on it when you saw the lineup. It's a 4-4-2, which is very sort of old school Roy Hodgson.
It's a flat 4-4-2 as well, isn't it?
It depends how you want to play it, but yeah, I think in goal I've gone for Valdemarsen at Elfsborg. I think that he had a fantastic season. I don't think that you could really leave him out. There's certain games he was a bit rash, but I think he missed certain matches and they struggled without him. And I felt that he was just really a class above most. Håkon Raffen Valdemarsen, I think he had a really, really good season. So fair play to him. Congratulations to him for Elfsborg. Sort of a good shot stopper, someone who made some big, big saves at certain times. I remember there was one or two games in the season where he pulled out some unbelievable saves. So in big moments, he could stand up. He's decent. I mean, he's not probably a keeper that rushes off his line, but he can do that. At times he got it wrong once or twice, but I think that in general he was very, very solid. And just I think as the season went along, he started to establish himself as one of the best keepers in the league, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that's a fair call. He stood out for me whenever I saw him. You've gone with a flat back four and players from 4 different teams. So run through these for us.
Yeah, now this is really hard because I had to sort of and ah really about some of them. Now, let's take, for example, the right back position. I've gone with Johan Larsson of Elfsborg. I really thought long and hard about Rui Modesto for AIK, but I just felt that, for example, in his first season, as a debut season, as a rookie in the league, I thought it was outstanding, Modesto at times. But I also think the fact that AIK had just such a bad year, I don't think they can have a player in the team of the season. Larsson was just solid, captain material, captain leader. Certain games he just breezes through them. someone who had just eventually had to sort of just accept defeat, Steve, and just put him in my fantasy team. I think I resisted him for 2 years, really. And
well, it worked for you, didn't it? It was actually you finally cottoned on to Johan Larsson, and he paid dividends for you. I think it was more the case of people didn't gain on Larsson against you.
I tried to sort of ignore him for a while and tried to think outside the box of how I could get around people selecting him. But sometimes, Steve, if you can't beat them, join them. And he delivered. I mean, he gets goals, he gets assists. The one game where they could have won a title, of course, remember that Degerfors match in the second last game where they threw it away. There was that 3-on-1, Steve. I mean, those sort of moments were the moments that Elfsborg just threw the title away a little bit. But you kind of just felt that he was someone who was so key to them, just being involved in the race in the first place, to be honest. So, he got an assist in that game, I remember, and he nearly got the winner, I think, if I remember rightly, in that Degerfors match, which would have won in the league. What a story that is, Steve, by the way, throwing it away to a relegated side. All they had to do was win that game at home, second last game, and they would have been champions. So, in a way, Elfsborg kind of have bottled the league in a sense, but Larsson gets in there. Other right side, so centre backs, I've gone for Marcus Danielsson of Djurgården. I think he was the one true standout for DIF in a pretty average year. They weren't bad necessarily, but they weren't great. I think Djurgården fans would expect better things. But Danielsson, someone who came back obviously from China and put in a really standout season for them. He just picked up where he left off. He's obviously he's a title winning captain, isn't he, Steve? He's a bit older now, getting on a bit, but fantastic in both boxes. From set pieces in the air, he's really dominant. He actually showed a bit of a penchant for splitting defense passes as well. His ability on the ball is a bit underrated, I think, at times. He really brings the ball out from the back at times, especially against low block teams who sit back. He's very good at sort of maybe making runs into the opponent's half and maybe just on the edge of the centre circle or inside the area and threading passes through into the forwards. He's actually quite good at that, and I think he picked up a few assists that way. The other centre back I've gone for, this was a controversial one. I could have gone for many. I could have gone for Cornelius at Malmö, for example. Could have gone for Gustav Lagerbielke at Elfsborg, and I wanted to, but I felt that the fact that he left the league and I've already got 2 Elfsborg players in my sort of defensive unit might be a bit too much. So I've gone for a bit of a left field one. He does technically belong to Malmö, but he's been at Mjällby. You could argue that you could pick some of the other Mjällby defenders. A shout out to sort of Rossler, for example. I thought he had a really good season. Tom Pettersson had a really good year, I thought, as well. But I've gone for Noah Eiler. I think in terms of ceiling, I think he's a really talented young player. There's a game, I think, against Malmö, actually, his parent club, where he was phenomenal for Mjällby, and they gave them a bit of a bloody nose, didn't they? Mjällby against Malmö. He is owned by them, of course, but his loan spell there was fantastic. And I just think, as a young talent, I think Noah Eiler is probably going to go on. There's a lot of rumours about a move maybe to MLS coming, so I could see him stepping up to a new league. And I know it's a bit of a tangent, Steve, but just watching Arma Hodzic in recent weeks at Sheffield United, I was just thinking to myself, it's incredible, isn't it, to see someone like him? I think he captained Sheffield United at one point, which is
I saw him get bullied off the ball by the Luton's attacker, and I was like, But it was still interesting to see, because I saw him at Bordeaux as well, of course. Can I just say, I like this pick because Malmö's defensive numbers were really good. They have the second best defensive record away from home as well. So I think it's a very fair call that one of their players does get in this team. Yeah,
and I think we have to give a shout out to Anders Torstensen as well. The defensive unit there, they were never really in much trouble, despite the fact that they've had sort of like they don't have a big budget themselves. So they have done well. Maybe not as well as Värnamo. I did think about which Värnamo player you could include, but I think as a unit, Värnamo were more of a team unit than, say, having standout individuals. Noah Eiler I've gone for. I think he will have a decent career. I don't know if he'd get to Arma Hodzic levels and play in the Premier League, but I certainly think he's a really promising talent. And as I say, Arma Hodzic, just on him, I know what you just said there, but I think it was great to see him kind of, just playing at the Premier League level. You don't get many from Allsvenskan going into their prime in the Premier League.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking the same. Whenever I see players from, Allsvenskan or Eliteserien, Sander Berger, an example as well, and just seeing them actually playing at the top level, that is such a high level that, fair play to them for actually getting there, even if it isn't always, the really elite standards. Be a fair play. Captain of Sheffield United in the Premier League, can't knock that, can you really?
Yeah, a really impressive achievement, especially in a short space of time. Left back, I've gone for Busanello of Malmö. For me, pound for pound, the best defender in the league all round. I think he was phenomenal, especially in the early part of the season where he kind of really just provided something really different to any other team in the league from that left back role. He can attack, can defend. He acted well as a sort of like a second winger, playing passes off the likes of Vecchio and Nanasi, and then coming in, cutting inside, either hitting a shot or putting in a pinpoint cross, like just a real dangerous attacking outlet and really good defensively. I think you could argue he was actually one of the best players, maybe top 5 in the league. Actually, I think you could argue this season all round. There was a few games he missed where they missed him as well, I felt. So Bussanello is my left back, and that takes us to midfield.
Yeah, I think Bussanello is a candidate for player of the year, actually. I think he was so solid, really, especially the first sort of 15, 20 games. Now, your team's a bit different to mine. There are some players included here who are who've left the league. We talked earlier on that there were so many big departures, and it starts here in midfield. But let's go through this midfield. We've got 2 central midfielders and obviously a left mid and a right mid, so I'll go through it.
Yeah, this is more about trying to fit in the right players into the right hole. So it's not necessarily that I want to play a 4-4-2 necessarily. But I think that I had to get Sebastian Nanasi in there, really. I thought about this, and he wasn't originally in my first draft. But I was like, you can't really ignore what he's done. I've written a Y Scout blog about him, so you can check that out on the Huddle blog with our partners Y Scout. Just going into the details, he's been fantastic. He gets goals, he gets assists, he's dynamic. He's been linked with big clubs. I think that he's probably going to be sold quite soon for a big fee. Really good between the lines. He makes that sort of final third passes really well. As I said, linking up with sort of Bussanello, he's a really good link player. Reminds me in certain way of a bit of Martinelli at Arsenal sometimes in the way he kind of like is able to sort of stand a player at 1-on-1 and then go either side of them and just link off other players. Maybe not as quick, obviously, as Martinelli, but just in terms of his intricate style. And I really like him, and I think he was a massive part of Malmö's title win. I think he did dip a little bit towards the end of the season, but I think the whole Malmö team did, really, to be honest. So I think he's fully deserving in this place, and I think you could definitely say, Steve, he's one of the young players of the season in Allsvenskan.
Yeah, I agree. I think Nas is really good at right mid. You put him in the team as your right midfield, right?
Yeah, he's going to go right mid, I'm afraid, because I've got to have a left midfielder, and I've gone for a Hammarby player. I'm going for Victor Jokanovic now. Probably wouldn't have originally been in my team, but I wanted a bit of variety. Was he one of the 11 best players in the league? Probably not. But in terms of variety, I felt like he has to be in it. Funny thing with him is, Steve, he didn't actually get a huge amount of minutes. He played in sort of 30-odd games, but he didn't get a huge amount of minutes. But despite that, he still managed to get 11 goals. So I feel like he's basically getting in there because, that is, I think, an incredible goal record for the number of minutes he got. He was often on the bench for Cifuentes' side. It's his first season in Allsvenskan, and he really took to it like a duck to water, to be honest. I think he's an outstanding talent. I mentioned, I think, on Twitter at one point that he, the goals he scores, I mean, Steve, 1,584 minutes, 11 goals. The only person who compares is maybe Benny Traore with 1,311 minutes before his big move. Everyone else in the top goal scorers pretty much has played 2,000 minutes minimum. Some of them 2,500-ish. The likes of Keita Tellin, 2,642 minutes. Nanasi, 2,716 minutes. So to score 11 goals in 1,584 minutes, I think is incredible. 19-year-old, I really think he's got a massive future, the Montenegrin, and therefore I think I've decided to put him in as the left winger. Like I say, I wanted a bit of variety. There's many other candidates. I thought about Tashreeq Matthews, for example, at Sirius. There's a few other players I could have maybe put in there, but I think all in all, Jokanovic, he's not going to be in Allsvenskan for long, so may as well do it while I can. And then 2 centre midfielders, I've gone for Hugo Larsson. I know that he left mid-season, but I think he is probably arguably the best talent that's ever come out of Allsvenskan in our time doing this podcast. And that's quite a big statement, but he's already a first-team regular at Frankfurt in the Bundesliga. Usually, an 18, 19-year-old kid from Allsvenskan goes to a team like that and is on the bench for long periods of time and needs 2-3 years to adapt, if they even make it, maybe a loan spell away. He has literally gone straight into their first team, and he's playing pretty much week in, week out, I think, at the moment. And outstanding talent. I do think Malmö's second half of the season hangover was in part because of Larsson's departure. They couldn't turn down that fee. I mean, they got more than £10 million for him. Incredible fee for an 18-year-old at the time. But I just think that, he just gels midfield so well. He brought an air of confidence, an air of class. And I just felt that when he left, although they had Peña, who's a good player, I didn't quite feel that they really recovered from his departure in terms of just that all-round stability, especially in transition moments. So Larsson, I think even though he played a half season, he deserves to be in there. And then I've got Mikael Rygaard at BK Häcken. I think that, he's an outstanding footballer. Some of the goals he scored, just out of this world, really. Such a good technical footballer. Massive part of their title win the year before. I think Häcken could have won the title again if they'd kept their players, maybe, this year. But they lost too many in mid-season. And Rygaard stayed. Had a dip once or twice just due to age, especially when Europe started. But I think he's arguably the best midfielder in the league after Larsson's departure, of course, as well. And fully deserves to be in our team of the season.
The two strikers that you put in have also sadly departed the league.
Yeah, we've got at least 4 players on this list that have left the league pretty much, or are leaving. But yeah, up front I've gone for Mileta Rajovic, now of Watford, formerly of Kalmar, and I've gone for Benny Traore at BK Häcken. Now, of course, probably could have gone for Webu Ali, for example, at Sirius, who really impressed me as well. Another player who scored a lot of goals with very few minutes. Wessam Abu Ali, I think he's going to be one to watch next season. Had a really, really good second half of the season after joining Sirius. Probably kept them up, to be honest, with his 10 goals. But I've gone for Traore, not Kiesa Tellin, because I felt like Traore is just such a massive player for them. Don't think they recovered when he left. I think the replacements didn't quite do as well. Hrstic was massive downgrade. Leuni did quite well, but he's a different kind of player to Traore, probably more of a wide player. Kiesa Tellin could feel a little bit hard done by, but I've got 3 Malmö players, I think. So I think he's gonna have to miss out on this one. I don't think 16 goals in a 30-game season is necessarily can't be not in it, if that makes sense. I think it doesn't mean he has to be in it. Rajovic only got 7 goals in Allsvenskan, to be fair. But I mentioned it many times. I mentioned it when he moved to Watford. I think he's a tank of a player, and I just really think he's a potentially. I think he potentially could play in the Premier League in the next few years as well. I know that he's scored a few goals at Watford. I know that also there's been some comments that he probably might need to improve a bit, become a bit more robust all round. But I think there's a real player in there somewhere. So I decided to go for Rajovic. I just think that he did so well to get the move. I think it's good scouting from Watford, and didn't really see. I could have maybe, if you look at the top scorers in the league, could have maybe picked Gustav Engvall, won 11 goals as well. Could have, obviously, Ockels, I quite liked him. I thought about a 4-5-1, but Ockels, I didn't want to have too many Elfsborg players. Ondrejka was one I thought about, but he left quite early. So Matthews is another one I could have put in if I'd gone for a 4-5-1, maybe. But I think all in all, I'm pretty happy with that 4-4-2 team and having Rajovic and Traore up front.
Yeah, that's a proper pairing, by the way. Like Traore and Rajovic, little and large, big man, pacey player. I like that pairing. That feels like it belongs in like 1990s Premier League, doesn't it? Coach of the season, who are you going with?
Yeah, coach of the season, Jimmy Tellin. Linked with the obviously Sweden national team job at the end of the year, and I think in general just been really good. This is the year that he's proved to me in my, like, any doubts I had maybe about him have gone. I think he's a top manager now for this level. Maybe could be the next sort of Kim Hellberg or Marty Fuentes in terms of maybe getting a big job elsewhere abroad. Maybe I thought about Henrik Rydström, he's probably a bit hardly done by there, but because they've got a much bigger budget, and the ability to spend, I just feel that Rydström is sort of just misses out. Although I do think he's a top coach, and I do think he's completely transformed Malmö, so I think he deserves massive praise for that. But Tellin, I think the fact that they lost some key players and still challenged for the title, they had a lot of doubts about them, and they kept going. There was a lot of teams that fell away, but they didn't, and I think that is a testament to their sort of resilience. even though they threw it away, winning the league really against Degerfors, which they'll be kicking themselves about for years to come, I think. I just feel that he kept the title race alive, really. Every other team would have been well out of it. Malmö would have won it easily if it wasn't for Elfsborg. So I've gone for Jimmy Tellin. Top 3, Jimmy Tellin 1, Henrik Rydström number 2, just narrowly number 2. And number 3, I've gone for Kim Hellberg at Värnamo. Absolutely outstanding achievement of Värnamo, what he's done. And it's sad to say, but I think Värnamo could be a candidate for relegation next year, just straight off the bat, because I think the coaching level of Värnamo, they might not have a player in the team in the season, but as a coached unit, I think they're one of the best in Allsvenskan. I think they get the absolute maximum out of every single player, Kim Hellberg, and I think he's got a big future in the game. I'm really interested to see Hammarby next year. That's going to be one to watch, I think. Can he break the Hammarby curse? So those are my top 3.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point with telling that everyone media prediction was mid-table. So for them to actually, lose the title on goal difference is a fair achievement. Before we go, player of the season and young player of the season. What are you going with?
Yeah, I haven't even named my player of the season yet. So it's not even on the spreadsheet. Steve doesn't even know who it is.
I was really thinking that you're going to surprise me with a player. I'm like, I don't know. I'm looking forward to hearing who it is.
He's panicking.
He doesn't even know. We know the young player of the year is Hugo Larsson.
Yeah, Hugo Larsson's my young player of the year. I don't think that there's anyone really better than him. As a young player, I second place would be Mamadou Sonko at Beko Häcken. I've heard he's been linked with very big clubs at the moment, and he had a really good end to the season. He was a bit hit and miss early in the season, but he's still a teenager, so you can see he's already growing in the absence of Sadiq. But yeah, I think my player of the season I'm actually going to name as I'm going to give it to Busanello, Steve.
Yeah, I thought you would. I agree. I do agree with you. I was just looking at your team of the year here, and I was thinking, this is my fantasy demise in a nutshell. And the 2 players especially were Busanello and Mikael Rygaard, who I just did not cotton on to early enough. I didn't believe in them, especially Rygaard. But they had monster years. And I suppose Rygaard would have been a contender as well, wouldn't he, for player of the year, really? But Busanello was just exceptional.
Yeah, I mean, the Allsvenskan official awards gave it to Nanasi, which I think is fair enough. I just think that defenders don't get enough love in these awards, do they? Unless they're sort of like rugged centre backs. I don't think that's not very fashionable to give a left back player of the year. But why not? Why not? He's above Allsvenskan level. He was consistent as he liked. Every single game he showed up. That it's rare that players week in, week out just putting in top performance. He reminds me a bit of Patrick Evra in his prime. Just week in, week out, you could guarantee a level of performance.
Doesn't have a weakness, really.
Not at this level. I mean, obviously, if he went higher, you never know.
Yeah.
But at this level, I just thought he was week in, week out. If you look at Malmö's all-round package, he was really key for them, as key as Nanasi, in my opinion. So, yeah, why not?
I think it's a great call. Great call. And it's been a great year here on Nordic Football Podcast. I don't know if you've got any closing thoughts, Jonathan, but it's been a bumper episode, probably over 2 hours, I think, when we count it back, or not far off. And we look forward. I'm actually in the mood now I'm looking forward to like March, April when these leagues get back. I'm kind of itching at it.
Well, yeah, I was going to say it's 2 hours, but you won't be seeing us until about March. So you can listen to it over 2 months if you want. But yeah, we will actually try and come back with a few episodes. There are a few little things in the pipeline, Steve.
Sarome Cup.
We can't comment on it necessarily. But my final comment's probably fantasy related. Finally knocked you off your perch. Finished 35th in the Nordic League, and you finished 49th. So delighted.
I was poor. I was shocking in the elite in Allsvenskan fantasy this year. I was nowhere near. I was way off with some players.
Delighted to end your reign. That was a personal mission of mine this year. And in terms of the winners, actually, just before we go, top 8 I'll name. We've got James Donnelly in 8th, a Texi. Good season for him, 1,832 points. BK Speeders, 7th, Hakan Rosenborg, 1,837. Mingus in Sweden, Andre Bugiak, 1,838. Svensson Blues, 5th, Martin Smith, 1,848. Sam Hart, friend of the pod. I think it was the Rajovic hat-trick early on when I was in Gothenburg. when last minute I told him to put Rajovic in his team and he captained him. That was surely the start of it all, but he gets 1849 in 4th place. Third, Disguise Association, Michael Tilberg, 1859. A lot of 10-point margins here, honestly. Second place, Olympic Mayonnaise, Larry McKee, 1876.
Hold on a minute. Is that this? Do you reckon that's the same Larry M who won Eliteserien and Fantasy?
Could be, actually.
Could be.
That could well
Larry,
be.
Larry, you've got to let us know. Is that the same Larry M as Eliteserien? Because if so, that guy is smash fantasy.
If so, he's
he's
a fantasy legend. But number one, there's only one winner. Malmö are the only winners in the Allsvenskan, despite it being very close. And in the Allsvenskan Fantasy Nordic Football Podcast League, it's Mr. Spongy, or Mrs. Spongy, or just Spongy. SP 1,902 points. Comfortable winner. Really great end to the season because the 16-point gap there was a big contributor. But congratulations, Spongy.
Yeah, well done to everyone in Allsvenskan Fantasy. I'll be raring to go next year. I'm expecting a rebound from me. I really need it. But well done to you, Jonathan. You had a solid year in fantasy. I will say that. You identified 2 or 3 key players early and stuck with the hot hand. That's what you got to do, right?
Even Eliteserien, I wasn't in the relegation this year, which is
you
to
had
me
a good year, fantasy.
a bigger achievement, I think, than even in Allsvenskan. But no, it's been a fantastic year. Obviously, as I mentioned, from September doing the Masters has been very challenging finding the time. But I appreciate all the listeners and your patience. So, and to you, Steve, as well, my colleague, for your loyal support as always. So that'll be it for 2023.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure doing it with you, Jonathan. Thanks to the listeners, thanks to the Patreons, and all you guys who comment and everything like that. And we'll be back. I don't know when exactly. I mean, so this is our first episode in January for 4 years. So we don't usually don't expect too much before the end of this month, but who knows what the spring may bring. And all I can say to you out there is do stay safe, winter well, and be ready for the return of the Scandinavian leagues.
And one other thing I'd say is keep your subscription feeds live. Don't cancel anything because we may have 1 or 2 big things popping up out of the blue on your feeds. Things are going on behind the scenes. We are contacting people. You might have 1 or 2 things up your sleeve.
It's very true, that. Not sure we're going to get a Rosenborg guest after the interview earlier, but I will no chance of getting one anyway. Anyway, but thanks to all our guests this year as well who have come on the show, and we look forward to more 2024. So goodbye, everyone. Take care. Follow us on the socials and do hit that like button and the subscribe button on YouTube if you've not already. So,
one thing I finally say is if you are able in this sort of off-season gap, it's really important if we do get any comments on iTunes or YouTube, if you can leave comments about the show. We really do appreciate it because reviews do help us a lot, especially on iTunes and Spotify. So, give us a rating if you can. Subscribe to the YouTube. Follow us at Nordic Foot Pod. And we shall see you very soon.